Hello, it's me, Treyjack. The collective obligation was a weapon that really ended up disappointing me. It felt like it lacked the punch an exotic raid weapon should have. However, Bungie must have felt the same way, because they gave this thing a huge rework. If you want the full details on the rework, I'm going to throw them up on screen now. Feel free to pause and read them for yourself if you're curious. With all these changes, I just knew I had to go back to this raid weapon and give it another chance. So I put together a build that turns you from a guardian into a bona fide raid boss. Oh, but before we get into the build, if you like the content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into the build. First things first, let's go over the collective obligation. Its exotic perk, Void Leech, states that this weapon leeches void debuffs when damaging targets that are suppressed, weakened, or volatile. Once charged, you hold the alternate weapon action to swap firing modes. In this mode, damage from this weapon applies the same void debuffs that were leeched. Its other perk, Umbral Sustenance, states that this weapon's magazine is automatically reloaded when you gain Devour, avoid Overshield, or become invisible. Each of these perks have some hidden benefits to them. With the new rework, if you are afflicted by any of the listed debuffs in the Void Leech perk, Collective Obligation is instantly charged with that debuff. Also, upon defeating a target afflicted with a Void debuff, the Collective Obligation is instantly charged with that debuff. As for Umbral Sustenance, its reload mechanic can also be triggered whenever you refresh your Devour. In order to best complement the Collective Obligation's exotic perks, I chose a simple but effective Warlock exotic armor piece to match it up with. The Nezaric's Sin exotic helmet has the exotic perk Abyssal Extractors, which increases your ability energy recharge rate upon getting a void damage takedown. For now, we're going to skip the armor mods and move straight onto the aspects and fragments, as those are the parts of this build which really make the collective obligation shine. For the aspects, I chose Feed the Void, which grants Devour upon defeating a target with a Void ability, and Child of the Old Gods, which, upon casting a rift, creates a Void Soul, which will drain grenade and melee energy, or health, depending on if you're running Healing Rift or Empowering Rift. Defeating the drained target will also grant you class ability energy. Time for the real meat and potatoes of this build, the fragments. First off, Echo of Expulsion, which, upon getting a Void ability final blow, causes that target to explode. Echo of Instability, which grants you volatile rounds upon defeating a target with your grenade. Echo of Undermining, which causes your Void grenades to weaken targets. And Echo of Provision, which grants you melee energy upon damaging targets with your grenade. As you can see with these fragments, the most important part of this build is the grenade. With these fragments equipped, throwing a grenade into a crowd of enemies will grant us volatile rounds when the grenade defeats a target, as well as causing those targets to explode, will weaken all targets hit by the grenade, and will restore melee energy upon damaging the targets. The most important two fragments being the ones that give us volatile rounds and that weaken the targets, because we will be leeching those debuffs with the collective obligation. To truly understand what makes this combination of aspects, fragments, and exotic gear so powerful alongside the collective obligation, let's go over the gameplay loop, which helps to truly bring out this weapon's strengths. When clearing adds with this build, you should always open with your grenade, as it will instantly apply the weaken debuff to any enemy that it hits. Your choice of grenade is mainly up to preference. As for me, I always go with the Vortex grenade, as it is able to consistently hit large groups of enemies at the same time. After opening with your grenade, you should only defeat one of the weakened targets with your collective obligation to ensure that you get the weaken charge on the Void Leech exotic perk. It is important that you let the grenade defeat at least one target so you can get volatile rounds on your weapon. Once you have those volatile rounds, feel free to clear the rest of the adds in the group, as doing so will charge your collective obligation with the volatile debuff. Using this rotation, upon clearing a group of adds, the collective obligation will be fully charged and ready to swap into its alternate firing mode, where it will be able to afflict enemies with both weaken and volatile rounds at the same time. For the next group of ads, you should solely use the Collective Obligations alternate firing mode, as this will trigger the Nezarec Sin's exotic perk, increasing your ability recharge rate, which, in turn, means you will have your grenade energy fully restocked for the next group of ads to, once again, open with your grenade to begin the cycle again with the first route. When getting ready for boss damage, you should make sure you end on the first route, so you have a fully charged Collective Obligation to hit the boss with. Now, I have a very specific method of dealing boss damage with this Collective Obligation build, and while your weapons are flexible, I highly recommend running this loadout, as it is some of the most optimized damage I've gotten out of this build. For your primary slot weapon, you should have a Riptide with Chill Clip, and for your heavy slot, any grenade launcher with Demolitionist, but my preference is the Hothead. Upon entering boss DPS, you are going to want to fire 3 rounds of Collective Obligation, which will apply weaken and volatile rounds to the boss. Swap to your Riptide and fire off 4 shots. Next, swap back to the Collective Obligation. Fire 3 shots again to reapply your weaken and volatile rounds. Swap back to the Riptide. Fire the last 4 shots of the magazine. Then, go back to the Collective Obligation. Fire another 3 shots to reapply your debuffs. Swap to your Demolitionist rocket launcher. Fire a shot. Throw a grenade to proc Demolitionist and reload the rocket launcher, and fire 1 more shot. What's so powerful about this route is that not only are you benefiting from the weaken and volatile rounds, but so is the rest of your team that is damaging the boss. In order to test this, I had my good friend Skyway help me run the Grasp of Avarice dungeon, and when fighting Avarok, I was able to put out about 1.29 million points of damage, and my buddy Skyway, a little over 3 million. If you're really curious, I'll throw up the armor mods I have on screen for you now. The main idea is just to have mods that will give you as much grenade energy as possible. What's really important is mastering that gameplay loop during ad clear and boss damage, so you can get the most benefits out of the Collective Obligations perks as you can. So yeah, that's my Collective Obligation build. I would love to hear your feedback on the build, and maybe even the video itself. Once again, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.